My name is Ian Morrison, and I speak for the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting, an independent media watchdog. Today, we are releasing an in-depth national opinion survey which shows that the overwhelming majority of Canadians value public broadcasting and give the CBC high marks for the job that it does. The CBC is a very popular institution almost everywhere, except in the Conservative caucus, and the government knows this. Sauf au Parlement canadien, dominé par les conservateurs, et parmi ceux qui ont un net conflit d'intérêts, nous savons que la vaste majorité des Canadiens apprécient et appuient le radiodiffuseur public national Radio-Canada. This explains why scores of Conservative Party candidates took such pains to reassure voters during the last election campaign that they, too, value the CBC, would never diminish it, and would maintain or increase CBC funding if re-elected. Just one day after the election, Heritage Minister James Moore said, I'm quoting, "We believe in the national public broadcaster. We have said that we will maintain or increase support for the CBC. That is our platform, and we have said that before, and we will commit to that," unquote. Canadians took the Conservative Party and its candidates at face value, responding positively. Our survey indicates that the Conservative Party is showing signs of recovery from the Prime Minister's attack on Canadian culture and artists during the 2008 general election, an attack that many believe cost Mr. Harper a majority government. Today, the Conservatives are the most trusted among the major parties to handle matters of national culture and identity. But this is only half the story. The other half is a cautionary tale for the Conservatives, whose constant attacks on the CBC since the summer may foreshadow deep cuts to CBC's parliamentary grant. If these cuts come to pass, the Conservatives will be offside with Canadians who overwhelmingly want their government to support the CBC. They will also reinforce baggage the Conservatives continue to bear, that they are anti-public broadcasting. 7 in 10 Canadians want the government to increase or maintain CBC funding. In other words, to keep their promise. Half of Canadians think the level of funding of the CBC is insufficient to maintain a unique and vibrant Canadian identity and culture. As you can see from the survey results, Canadians expect the federal government to protect and enhance the CBC, not to diminish it. Slashing the CBC's parliamentary grant by 10% would have devastating consequences. Hamilton, London, the Waterloo region, and Kamloops would not likely see the new digital radio services that they have been promised. Indeed, the CBC would likely be forced to close stations. The impact would be even greater if the government were to cancel the annual programming top-up of $60 million, which the CBC has relied upon since 2002. Today, we are launching STOP the CBC SMACKDOwn, a campaign in defense of our national public broadcaster. Using satire, the campaign will give voice to the strong majority of Canadians who support the CBC and call on the Conservative government to keep its election promise to maintain or increase CBC funding. SmackDown parodies the worst-case scenario, becoming more likely with each passing day's events here on Parliament Hill that the government secretly intends to sell some or all of the national public broadcaster to the highest bidder. Each video contains a message to Canadians from the CBC's new owner, Lance Fury. By way of introduction, Lance is a personal friend of the Prime Minister's and a former professional wrestling promoter from the U.S. who plans to add some action to CBC National News and to sex up CBC Radio. Now, we're going to play these two videos right now, but if you're watching this from a remote location, I don't think you'll be seeing them, and I just want to draw to your attention that the link on the bottom of page 3 of our news release will take you to those videos, which are up on the web right now. Can you roll that, Jim?
The reason I'm here is simple. Because as an American, I know what Canadians want. They want information, they want entertainment, they want action. And a place to grow wheat. And lots of it. This is my first WTF belt. Still fits! Thanks to the cuts that we are putting into place, Canadians will no longer have to get their information or their entertainment or their action separately. I'm bringing them all together. I'm calling it infotectiontainment. Same word in French. This is my Mexican wrestling phase, my last fight. I paralyzed the guy from the neck up. My first task is to meet everyone in the building, get to know them, get their take on what needs to be done before I fire them. So get this, fellas. The National will now be called the National. Emphasis on action! Because action is what this network fundamentally needs.
Obama, your mama's gonna rip Gaddafi's head off this Sunday at the Armory. Be there. Now the weather. Tomorrow there will be the weather. Big snow. High pressure systems from the east put a stranglehold on low pressure systems from the south. Big flurries. Don't be there. You're going down.
It slays. Canadians are gonna love this. I mean, let's be honest. They're very unique in that they're just like Americans, except for the Quebecians, who are more like the Puerto Ricans. But now that I'm here, there'll be something for everyone. But don't worry, Canada. I won't be touching your wheat. Except this Friday, when I'll be stomping on it. Just kidding. The reason I'm here is simple. Because as an American, I know what Canadians want. Thanks to the cuts that we are putting into place, Canadians will no longer have to get their information or their entertainment or their action separately. My way, I'm bringing them all three together at once. Like a mélange à trois, as the French would say. Without the hairy armpits. My given name is Lancelot. It's the kind of name that either makes you furious or gay. I chose furious. So I became Lance Fury. I also know how important CBC Radio is to Canadians. Especially the French part, where they have no electricity. This is the first cup I drank my own urine from. It's gonna be no talk, all action, except for the commercials.
Are you losing your hair?
Need a new mattress?
What about the water heater?
Cars with 0% financing? Horsepower? JD Powers?
This Saturday at the Armory. Be there.
This Friday at the Armory. Be there.
It's Saturday.
It's Friday.
Saturday.
Friday.
Are you saying I'm wrong? Ah!
That's why we're turning CBC Radio 2 into CBC Radio 666. Very sexy.
So that's it. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Do you think the Harper government cares that 7 in 10 Canadians support increased or funding to the CBC? Like, do you really think that that's going to matter to them?
We're going to find out. I'm not going to read their minds, but we want to draw to their attention that public broadcasting is very popular with Canadians, including the majority of people who support the Conservative Party, and it's extremely popular with people whose second choice is the Conservative Party. I suspect some of them may already know that, but we're just underlining it for them.
You seem to be reading their minds by putting out these ads that suggest they're going to sell the CBC to someone, obviously fictitious guy in these ads, but they've never said anything that would indicate they're going to sell the CBC. Their first announcement after the election was to say the $60 million extra each year was safe. They've been very strong in saying that CBC is safe other than having to do what every other department does. So why are you putting out there the idea that they're going to sell CBC?
This is a worst case scenario, and has the satirical intent of drawing to people's attention the ultimate end that might flow from this. The problem with this government is that they speak out of well more than two sides of their mouth on this issue. I quoted Minister Moore in my short remarks. I could quote Minister Moore 10 weeks later when he said something different, and as you may know, in the House of Commons recently, he's uttered the word CBC in the same breath as the Canadian Wheat Board. Any thoughtful Canadian seeing what's happening on Parliament Hill in the past month or two would have cause for alarm, and we're quite satisfied that we're doing the right thing in drawing attention to the worst case scenario.
Didn't in your poll when you asked about the funding levels, you didn't actually say this is how much Canadians pay for the CBC through taxpayer subsidies.
Just a matter of fact, everyone in the room has received a copy of the package.
$3 per capita. You didn't put in a total amount.
Yeah, they'd have to know how to multiply 33 by 34 to get to 1.1. Many people can do that. There was somebody right behind you.
Hold on. I was in the middle of asking a question. When other polls have put that out there, support for funding levels has dropped. Was it a conscious decision on your part not to say CBC gets more than $1 billion a year from the federal government when you're asking people about funding levels?
We put it in per capita in this survey released today. As for others, if you're interested, 33 per capita is, and this is referenced in the report if you have a chance to look at it. It sounds like a nice pot of money. The average per capita investment in public broadcasting in OECD countries, the Western democracies, is $80 per capita. And about 3 or 4 years ago, the Heritage Committee in this Parliament building recommended that CBC's funding rise from 33 to 40 in progressive stages over a 5-year period. And their argument was that it would bring it to at least half of the average for the Western democracies.
My question was actually going to be identical to Mr. Lilly's, but who paid for these two spoof ads? They look like they're very high quality production. Where do you get all of your money from for these sort of things?
Well, first, thank you. Appreciate that comment. These ads cost something in the range of $200,000. $50,000 of that was cash. And that money comes from ordinary Canadians. The Friends of Canadian Broadcasting is financed by gifts from individual Canadians who care about the values that we express. There are about 150,000 of those people. If you want details, they're on our website. But the 150 is our estimate of the discounts, or in some cases 100% discounts, that we got from suppliers because they believed in the campaign. But I think it might be worth telling you that not 1 cent of that came from taxpayers or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
You speak of these constant attacks. How would you characterize them, and why do you believe that they're going to foreshadow budget cuts in February?
During the lead up to and during the period of the writs of the last general election, we are for our sins, we're organized, and we have supporters across the country. So we know we have received from voters who support us letters, emails, things of that nature, from many scores of Conservative candidates, most of whom are victorious candidates and now work out of this building, saying essentially variations of what Minister Moore said on May 3rd, which I read out a few minutes ago. So take that as a background, and then just run through what's been happening since then. Moore's comments on CBC Radio in July. All of this stuff is on our website if you need details. The stuff in question period, the stuff in the Heritage Committee, some of the stuff in the Access to Information, Ethics and Privacy Committee, if I've got that name right. There have been picking up the vocabulary of the Sun News calling the CBC a state broadcaster, when most people know that that's the kind of thing that we used to describe during the Cold War the other side's broadcasters as being. That kind of thing. Conservative backbenchers echoing that. Three petitions, at least that I'm aware of, filed in Parliament in the last couple of months calling for the defunding of the CBC. That's a partial list.
Is it a witch hunt?
We don't know. I mean, which James Moore do we believe? There's more than one James Moore. So we care about this. This is an ounce of prevention. This is trying to get out front and to draw the story in a way that Canadians, perhaps focusing on younger Canadians, would relate to and understand. And if you follow it on the website, you take that seriously, you go and click, you'll find ultimately that you're getting a chance to send a message to Prime Minister Harper. And the message says, essentially, we care about this and we would like you to keep that election promise.
This is the worst case scenario. Why did you choose to use professional wrestlers doing commercial car commercials as the worst case scenario? Do you think that professional wrestling or people who watch it are stupid or lowbrow?
No.
Why is worst case scenario?
Well, I suppose the creative people who designed these things could have come up with another scenario. This is the one that we liked, and we found that they're funny. They're obviously over the top, but they're designed to convey a message in a very short period of time. And I guess they're not out of step with the whole world of persuasion and advertising today, particularly on the internet, which is, of course, the method that will be used to distribute them.
Today on a study of what would happen to the CBC if we weren't allowed to carry advertising. You probably saw that.
I did, yeah.
What's behind that? Is that in the works? Do you think that's...
Well, I what's behind the study is I'm just reading the Hill Times. It sounds to me as though the CBC paid for it. It sounds to me as though President Lacroix released it yesterday at some conference in this city. But why would he do so? I remember a few months ago he released a study about that Deloitte's did about the economic value added of the CBC. We are arm's length plus 50 miles from President Lacroix. So he'll have to answer why he did that. As to the scenario itself, we listen to things that are going on around this town, and one of the things we have heard is that the government might be thinking of trying to take the CBC out of commercial activity. And I draw your attention, by the way, to a speech by Prime Minister Harper when he was the leader of the opposition back in 2004. To the then Canadian Association of Broadcasters, where he floated that idea.
Yeah. A point of clarification, when you were asked, responding to the question about the funding for the video, you mentioned that $150,000 was kicked in.
I should just say that more clearly, perhaps. If we valued all of the resources that were contributed to make those two videos, if we had to pay cash for them, we estimate that it would be close to $200,000. And we here to tell you that we actually paid $50,000, including HST. Yeah.
Yeah. Producers, the actors, who volunteered?
I guess you're pushing me past privacy there with respect to individuals. So what I'm prepared to say is that a number of people contributed their skills. As you may know, what you see on the screen is the tip of the iceberg. The production process is fairly sophisticated. And we got good deals from a lot of people right from the creation to today. Mm-hmm.
Speaking to a conference this morning, and he was asked if he thinks that Mr. Mansbridge's salary should be made public, and he said maybe. Do you have an opinion on that?
It reminds me of a comedy skit where somebody said, "I said maybe, and that's final." I think that the president of the CBC and some of the senior executives, their salaries should be in the public domain. When you get to people who are essentially like your colleagues, journalists, no, I wouldn't favor that. And none of the people that communicate with me on the topic have raised Peter Mansbridge's salary as an issue that they're concerned about. They're concerned about, they're not concerned about the suits at the top of the CBC, all of whom who were appointed, by the way, by Prime Minister Harper at this point. They're concerned about the creative people who actually make the programming that Canadians hear and see and also experience on the web daily. That's the real CBC. And to the extent that those people are journalists or involved in creative activities, I certainly am a strong supporter of Section 68(1) of the Access to Information Act. And you may know, if you follow the subject, that Friends has been among the groups who's actually put in access requests to the CBC and been quite substantially rebuffed, as I told the Access Committee last month.
With your access on the American consultancy firm that CBC hired to recap their news broadcast?
Oh, just in case others didn't hear what the question was, it happens that one of our access requests a couple of years ago was a pretty simple request. It said we'd like to know the total dollar value of any and all contracts to a company called Frank R. Magid, M-A-G-I-D, and Associates, or maybe it's Associates. And the CBC refused to answer that question.
You appealed it, and now what happens?
Nothing. Everything's in abeyance because of stuff that's going on at the Federal Court of Appeal. We may someday get the answer. But the decisions on that, again, I just want to say, as I said to the members of the Access Committee, are all being made by 12 individuals that your government appointed to the board of directors, the chair, and the CEO of the CBC. Oui.
Y a-t-il des versions françaises du vidéo?
Non, pas du tout. Nous sommes un groupe de pression, un groupe de chiens de garde du côté anglophone. Et comme vous savez, les systèmes audiovisuels anglophones francophones ne sont pas semblables dans ce pays, en particulier parce que le grand effet de programmation américain est presque tout en anglais. Et nous collaborons de temps en temps avec des groupes francophones, mais nous n'avons pas jamais pris la position que nous pouvons parler du côté francophone. Et la valeur de cette campagne, comme j'ai dit, était grand-chose pour nous. Et nous ne sommes pas capables de le faire en français, mais nous allons donner notre appui à n'importe quel groupe qui a la même intention du côté francophone. Okay?
On the access side of the equation, do you think if CBC handled things differently, in terms of refusing your request on Frank Maggot, requests on how many trucks they have, always invoking 68.1 to a degree that many people, including the Information Commissioner, thought was going too far. Did that hurt them to the point where these attacks that you're worried about now have some resonance because they were being secretive and the courts have told them now you've got to open up?
Anyone who visits our website, and it's a very searchable site, would see that we have been critical of senior management of CBC for, I'm trying to remember when it might have started, when Pierre Junot was the president or something like that, okay? Certainly there are documents on our site that give former President Rabinovich an F for his performance at the CBC. So we're not saying that the current leadership is better or worse, but I would commend to your attention something that we gave the Access Committee a month ago, which was a few links. I think it's in the Hansard. If not, I'd be happy to supply it to you, to the BBC website and the statements that the BBC makes there about being committed to adhering to the spirit and the letter of what they call in Britain the Freedom of Information Act. There are models in other countries that I would commend to the leadership of the CBC.
But some of the problem are these attacks getting resonance because CBC management has acted inappropriately on other matters that's, allows people that want to destroy CBC to come forward and say, aha, see, this is why they need to be defunded, sold, what have you.
Hard to know what is causative there. I mean, the influence of Sun News, of the entire Quebecor organization, it's not without influence. That could try to propel an agenda. The change in the tune, as I have outlined in my remarks, of members of the Conservative, some members of the Conservative caucus, is there too. But I don't think it's got resonance with the Canadian public. It's not showing up on our radar from the people that the 150,000 or so people that support us. I think it's a side issue, and it relates to the senior management of the CBC. And what we're here to defend, as I mentioned, is the people who actually make the radio television programs that Canadians coast to coast love and watch daily. Something like 80% of Canadians use CBC each week. That's it. Thank you very much.